I really need people to stop using the solicitors that their mortgage brokers are recommending.
What will happen with the Bank of England base rate this year?
You don't do this every day. We do. I knew the things that could potentially be pushed back on. The client didn't.
Steph's 4,745 days worth of experience.
I would never ever tell a buyer to start paying out legal fees or start doing anything that involves any money until actually there is a chain in place.
What would be your top piece of advice for someone looking to upsize in the market?
They are often what I call factory conveyancers.
Yeah.
Who will just...
Should I start looking before I go on the market? The options that somebody, when selling their house to buy a bigger one, what's an agent's goal when they put a client's house to market? So welcome back to Your Next Chapter, the podcast brought to you by Bespoke. Now, what we want these to be is really impartial home moving advice for anyone that's thinking or trying to move house. So today, we're joined by the Briscoe.
What a name.
Super Steph, as she's known. Our head of sales at Bespoke. Now, I've got some fun facts, Briscoe. Almost 7 million sold so far this quarter, and that's a lot of units as well. I'm going to come on to that. Average percentage of list price of 101%.
Take that.
Just in March, I don't like disclosing this kind of stuff because it's not important to home movers, but it's quite important to show the level of performance of £55,000 of revenue brought into the business. One person, one agent, 1 month. Pretty remarkable. It's not actually your highest though. Your highest ever was 78, I think I was looking.
Was it?
Yep.
Oh no.
So you need to up your game. And the importance of that 7 million is what I really admire about you is that you're not a snob estate agent. Maybe a bit of a snob, but not a snob estate agent. And some agents, like, all they want to do is sell £1 million plus houses and they want to charge £15,000 average fee. But the reason why I think we get on so well is that you're all about helping Mr. and Mrs. Jones, the growing family, move from their 400 grand house and buy a 600 grand house.
Yeah.
So I think the volume is really important, and I wanted to frame that. So welcome.
Thanks. Hello.
I've got loads of swerve balls for you.
Oh, I can't wait.
I told you I would. This whole episode is focused on home moving. We had Georgie in a couple of months ago, talking about advice for first-time buyers. We're going to talk about home moving advice for upsizers.
Yeah.
Really important in any kind of market. You've got subsets: first-time buyers, investors, upsizers, downsizers, relocators. And we'll get through them all eventually, so subscribe to the channel. But today we're going to specifically focus on upsizers. And while we're talking about this kind of stuff, we're going to pull on Steph's 4,745 days worth of experience being an estate agent, which is 13 years. But
that makes me feel really old.
But 13 years sounds pretty boring. 4,745 days. And I say that because that's 13 years times the days. But estate agency is like an everyday kind of thing. I think you'd agree, right? That you do something to do with it every day, even on a Sunday.
Yeah.
You might not be full on, but it's an everyday kind of thing. So let's start with a big question that everyone keeps asking on social media. What will happen with the Bank of England base rate this year?
Oh, I think it's going to go down. I do think it's going to go down eventually, but I think we're going to stay stagnant now for a little while, to be fair. I'm not sure it will change dramatically anytime soon. With everything going on with Trump at the moment, that might be interesting to kind of keep an eye on. But I do think it's really important to remember that the Bank of England base rate doesn't solely determine mortgage rates, because everyone's always very conscious of the Bank of England base rate's going to go down, therefore the mortgage rates will follow. And they don't necessarily follow suit perfectly. So you've got to keep an eye on things, yes, but don't hold off anything with regards to your move or anything like that, just purely based on what the Bank of England base rate might do.
Love that. I think it will hold for the rest of this year.
Oh. I think end of the year we'll see a little drop.
Stick that in a clip and let's see at the end of the year what's going to happen. And it's interesting, I keep flicking around on that because I'm like, oh, it's been held 2 quarters in a row now, I think, isn't it? And I think it would definitely be held for another one, but I think there's every chance it could be to the end of the year. So let's see. Right, let's jump into the really important information for upsizers. What would be your one piece of major advice for people that are sitting there watching this now? The algorithm's picked it up that they're maybe looking to move house. What would be your top piece of advice for someone looking to upsize in the market?
Do not put your house on the market after you found a property or after you think you found a property.
Love that.
make sure that you put yourself in the driving seat. And the only way of doing that is to actually take control of the situation, which is to get your house valued, your house then on the market, find yourself a buyer. And only when you've actually done that and you found that buyer, that to me is the time that you seriously go out and look for a property and you really try and find the next one seriously.
So that's the time you become a buyer, almost. Yeah.
But if you're going to be a buyer in that market where you're still going to be up against first-time buyers or people with nothing to sell or cash buyers, you need to make sure that you're in the strongest position you can be. Because if you're in a weaker position, your negotiation has to be weaker. Your negotiation actually has to be stronger, and you have to offer more money normally in order to then stand a chance against those sort of people.
It's interesting because you said not put your house on the market before you start looking. You said have your house under offer with a buyer before you start looking.
Yeah, properly. Look on Rightmove. You can do your research. You can have a bit of a scan, but don't actively go and look at things that you potentially could fall in love with until you're in a position to buy them.
But what if I never find anything, Steph, that I like?
Well, you're never going to if you're not in a position to buy it.
So it's a really interesting point, and we get that a lot, right? As in, I won't go on the market until I found a house to buy. We say, you're probably never going to find a house to buy without going on the market and getting under offer. And they say, but what if I have a buyer for my house and I don't find anything I want to buy? What would be your reply to that?
You lose your buyer and you find a new one.
Nice.
You've lost nothing by doing it that way. In order for you to find a buyer again, you don't pay more fees, you don't pay anything extra, you don't put yourself out of pocket or anything really by just having to find someone new. And harsh as that is potentially from a buyer's perspective, and horrible as it might sound, you have to be quite selfish in these situations. You have to look after number one.
Well, I don't think it's horrible at all, as long as it's made crystal clear to the buyer from the outset.
That there's a chain, absolutely.
And that's what agents don't do, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, they're really keen to move and they want to be moved by the end of July. When in reality, that's complete crap.
Yeah.
And the agent fully knows that they've got to find a house. They might not even find a house. They might come off the market. They might change their mind. So I don't think it's bad at all, as long as, like, for example, good practice, good advice for somebody who can go on the market. On our property details, when we advertise them, we always put the seller's position in the description. We're probably one of the few that do that in the market. And the reason for that is so when someone inquires, they know straight away seller's position. It might say found suitable property to buy. It might say no chain. It might say yet to find a house to buy. So make it crystal clear from the first inquiry.
And I think it's really important to note that we'll then also make it really clear when someone offers. So it's like reinstating that fact as well of if you've got a timeline that you have to work towards and you have to stick to. I had one recently where they offered on a property where the seller needed to find somewhere. So it was an open-ended chain and the buyer was very much saying to me, but I need to be in the next couple of months. Now, we had a really long conversation anyway about the fact that wanting to be in somewhere in a couple of months, regardless of chain, is very difficult. Chances are slim to none right now, I would say. But aside from that, there was a chain and I made it very, very clear to them. I cannot have any guarantee over timescales at all because it's completely open-ended right now. Now, that buyer didn't proceed, but I'd rather they didn't proceed there and then in that moment than us get a month down the line and then they end up in a situation where they pull out again. There's no point.
Because you said the seller was really keen to move.
Yeah.
Like, have it so much that someone calls up and says, oh, I'm really frustrated. I was told they were really keen to move and I just pulled it off the market. And it was just wrong advice.
Yeah.
You would rather go through 2 or 3 buyers to get to the right one than just jump at the first one.
Yeah.
Keep them on a string. Yeah, interesting.
And that way, if a buyer does then pull out at a later date, that's completely their choice, completely on them. As a seller, you've not done anything wrong. As an agent, we've not done anything wrong. It's totally their decision.
I've put deals together in the past where it's like, that's accepted, but you should keep looking for a house. And if you find something you can move on quicker, you should probably move on it that you like just as much. The seller's happy for me to say this to you. We've agreed it. They will do all they can to make their purchase happen and find a house to buy, but they can't guarantee it. So heads of terms, I guess, are agreed, but nothing's set in stone. No surveys are being done. No solicitors are being instructed, because then you start to incur cost when it might not all go through. That's
really important as well. I would never, ever tell a buyer to start paying out legal fees or start doing anything that involves any money until actually there is a chain in place and a complete chain in place as well. So even if my clients find somewhere and then they need to find, I'm still probably not encouraging my buyer to start the process because there's still the potential that someone else in the chain could pull out, and therefore my sellers are not buying that property anymore. So,
well, we go as far as to not even send memorandums, right?
Yeah.
And I had an agent in the chain, and he was like, "Why'd you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, because there's no point until there's complete chain." And he's like, "Yeah, but we're always told to get the buyer committed early on, get them to get their survey done ASAP, so they're into it for 1,500 quid. Then they're less likely to pull out later down the line."
Was that a big corporate agent by any chance?
It was indeed, yeah. So, and I said to him, that's exactly why we don't do it, because then the emotion and the cost and everything is just a train wreck, and that's why you've got so many bad reviews and we've got so many great ones.
You're trapping someone by doing that. You're literally trapping them into buying.
And
that's not fair.
I think it's fine to trap as long as you're trapping ethically.
I was just about to use the same word, which sounds really backwards. I don't think you can trap ethically, but I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah, you can say, "Mr. Buyer, you're welcome to get your survey done if you want to have that early on, but please do so in the understanding that the chain is not complete and it may never be."
Yeah, it's on their head. It's their risk, not someone else's.
That's totally different to your offer's accepted. Great news. The seller's out this weekend. There's 5 houses they think they're going to have to buy. Get your survey done. Instruct your solicitor. It's just a nightmare. So how things are handled are so important in any market or whatever your situation, but particularly upsizing.
Yeah.
Because now we're breaking down, the number one thing everyone asks, should I go on the market before, should I start looking before I go on the market? Yada, yada, yada. No is the answer.
Yeah.
In fact, even worse, more than that, don't even start looking until you've got a secure buyer on your house. And the really important point on that is because that buyer will determine how attractive you are as a buyer and how bullish you can be in a negotiation. Because if your eventual buyer is in rented with a 50% mortgage deposit versus under offer on their 2-bed house, they're selling a 1-bed flat, and the chain's really long behind you, you're not going to be attractive.
No.
So this comes back to, what's an agent's goal when they put a client's house to market?
2, I would say. Sell it to the best buyer for the best possible price. Now, that's a bit of a trick one in the sense that the best possible price is not necessarily the highest price if the best buyer is offering slightly less.
I weren't sure if that question was going to backfire on me, but I'm so happy that it didn't.
You can pay me later.
And that's exactly what I was hoping you were going to say. As in, so what I've always said to people is, my job is to get you options, not a buyer.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to get you full asking price, 20 grand under asking price, and 20 grand over asking price. But back to what you've just said, you need to get the client the outcome that best suits their situation.
So I've just had it at the start of this week with a property that I launched. I'm going to just show off a minute. I launched on Thursday. We had lots of viewings on Saturday. We had 3 offers come Monday.
Oh, that one.
Perfect. Yeah. But the 3 offers that came in, we had one that was a first-time buyer, 15 under the asking price. We then had, and this was best and final offers, so obviously all of them started at different places. We worked our magic and negotiated them up and everything else. First time buyer, 15,000 under. Person in a chain but under offer, short chain, at the asking price. And then someone else who had a buyer, but that buyer wasn't proceedable yet, and it was all very open-ended and therefore not proceedable technically. They offered 15 over the asking price. So we had 15 under, 15 over and asking price, all different situations. And the seller and I then had a really long conversation about what's the best scenario for them. They opted to go for the middle, so under offer, proceedable, asking price. They didn't want to be too greedy and try and get more when that you don't know what that's going to end up resulting in because it's not a complete chain yet.
You could play silly games and have less, couldn't you, at the end of it as well?
And because the other thing that's really important, which applies for you as a buyer and a seller, or just for the people coming in and buying yours, until you've got an offer on yours, you don't actually know what money you've got to play around with.
Yeah.
So an offer from someone who's not under offer doesn't really mean anything. No. Because if they don't get the offer that they want, then they can't offer you what they've offered. And therefore it just ends up getting renegotiated later on.
And data says that the average property sells for, I think it's 82% of its original market launch price. I'm not saying asking price, market launch price, because we know that on average 50% of houses change estate agents before eventually selling.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try and be quick at explaining this, but we all know that you go on the market at 500 grand because it was overvalued generally by the agents that were pitching for the business, tie you into a long contract, yada, 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 work the price down. So let's say you go on at 500, doesn't work out, reduce to 475, you've missed the boat, you move to another estate agent, they went on the market at 450, and then you're 50 grand already, which is 10%, down from what your original market launch price.
Yep.
Then it's been on the market now 3 months, 4 months, kicking about the market. Buyers aren't very interested in it. And so you get an offer of, I don't know, what figures we're talking about?
450 you're at, so 45?
45, and then all of a sudden you're way below, around the 85% of original market price. Now, the reason why the point you've just said is really important, because we have it all the time. I've just gone on the market, 500,000. My agent says I'm going to have buyers queuing up so I can afford 600,000. So that, and we'll touch on this in a minute about the ultimate goal, but that 600,000 budget they thought they had based on selling at 500 has now become 525 because they've sold at 425. So it's wooden dollars, I think I would call it.
Yeah, or monopoly money.
Real. Monopoly money, exactly. So there's 17 minutes of reasons why you should not start looking at houses until you're under offer on your own.
Yeah.
Love that. And what you touched on, which I waffled on about something, which I went off point, but you said me and the seller discussed each offer.
Yeah. Choose
an estate agent that you trust to advise you, not just stick your house on Rightmove. When you're employing an estate agent, you're employing, notice the words I use there, someone to get you from where you are to where you want to be. You're upsizing. But not only that, in the best financial position possible. So I'm going to move on now to something where Steph has negotiated, was it about 60 grand off the purchase price of the house that your client wanted to buy?
Yeah.
Great example of choosing a great agent, estate agent, not a selling agent. If you're instructing an estate agent, they should be helping you on your sale and your purchase, because their goal is to get you to where you want to get to in the best financial position possible. Talk me through a little bit. I was updating our data sheets and I was like, have you negged any purchases recently for clients? You said, I saved them 60 odd grand, and it was new build, stamp duty, yada, yada, yada. But a 5-minute kind of masterclass on negotiation.
I mean, it probably helped slightly in this situation that I knew the people at the new home site from old. So I had a bit of a relationship there, which helps.
That matters though, because is your agent experienced, been in the market a long time? That's
what I was just about to say. I think that's another factor to consider with all this, is actually the number of times, when it comes to negotiations for a client onwards, I always say to them, you need to work out whether you think that you're the best person to put the offer forward or whether I'm the best person to put the offer forward.
Yeah.
If I know someone and I've got a good relationship with them from old, I'm the best person to put the offer forward. If I've never ever spoken to them a day in my life because they're out of area or something like that, actually that client may well have built up a relationship with that agent already, and they may be the best person to speak to them, but I can still help them with a strategy behind the scenes that they can put forward. Now, with this particular instance, I knew the people on the site, very helpful. They had wanted to buy this house previously, but not been in a position to. So they tried to offer through this new homes company before directly, and they'd secured the property on one of these assisted move deals.
Gives you 4 weeks to reserve, blah, blah, blah.
Which, when then it doesn't work out, you just get your deposit back and nothing's changed. It's very odd. But anyway, so they'd done that already at a higher price.
Yeah.
And then when it came to it, I just said to them, this property's obviously now been on the market for quite a while longer in the time that you've been trying to sell. A new build developer as well has to sell the property. It's always key as to whether someone has to sell or just would like to sell, as to how much negotiation you can do with them.
Yeah.
But a developer has to sell the property. They're not going to keep it. So I just phoned them up and just went in with a very lowball offer. At first, we very much went down the route of a bit off the asking price and include stamp duty, which at the price that they were buying at was a lot.
But you would have known that new homes developers, that most Joe Bloggers don't know, which is important to know, that they would rather include stamp duty and quote a higher sale figure for their development than take a much lower price.
I also know, having worked with developers before, very closely when I've dealt with big sites that I've been selling on their behalf, I know that they overinflate the prices in the first place so that they can allow for the stamp duty deals and for the buyer incentives and for the money off and things, whatever incentive they want to play.
And still get their asking price.
They still get what they wanted to achieve, but they feel like they've done it. The buyer feels like they've got a really good deal out of it. But actually the house was just overinflated in the first place. But yeah, I was told by this developer, I think it was about 75,000 off the asking price at that point. And they just said, we're not going to be doing anything like that. I think it needs to come a lot closer. All we did at that point was add another 10,000 on to what we were prepared to offer. So we were still quite a bit off what they'd suggested to me would be the price. And then we did what you like to call a Mexican standoff. and just left it there.
Love one of them.
The developer said, I don't think it's going to be a goer, but let me speak to the sales manager. And I just said, well, that's the best we're going to do. So you have a chat and see what you want to do. And 3 days later, they came back and accepted the offer.
3 days.
Yeah.
So there's a great bit of information. One, amazing work. But most people couldn't wait 3 days. Most buyers wouldn't be, without someone guiding them, they wouldn't be able to wait 3 days for an answer.
And I get that.
And they'll go back and say, oh, okay, 10 grand more.
And I've been in that situation.
Yeah, same.
I will always say one reason why I personally would never suggest trying to sell a house on your own or actually doing negotiations on your own either, if you can avoid it. If you're negotiating for yourself, you're using your heart. If I'm negotiating for you, I'm using my head.
Yeah.
Now, as someone who is a negotiator, who's been doing this for years, and I think I'm very good at it, when I had to negotiate for myself, I crumbled.
Yeah, same. Takes the mick out of me. She's like, you're supposed to be some lean, mean negotiation. They've just pulled your pants down.
Yeah, when it's personal, it's awful.
Yeah.
So have someone to work on your behalf if you can.
And what's interesting there, though, is you said they had offered on it higher previously, unproceedable. You got them proceedable, and then you were able, with a strong buy behind them, that enabled you to go in like a steam train to say things have changed. Yeah, they might have said that was their offer back then, but now they've got a chain-free buy or a massive buy deposit or whatever, or a complete chain. This is the deal now. And
that developer had also had that house now on the market for another 3 or 4 months with no movement. It just, they were in a weaker position as well. We were in a stronger position than we were. They were in a weaker position than they were.
Yeah. Talk to me about, there's a couple more things I want to go deep on. So one of them is the options that somebody, when selling their house to buy a bigger one, the options they have when it comes to an offer. Most people think that there's just 2 options, accept or refuse. And this ties in really well with that previous conversation about negotiation. What's the third option that they've got that people think they haven't got?
Use the offer. And I've got someone else again that is doing exactly that this week.
So let me frame that a little bit before you probably take the words out of my mouth. People make decisions when moving house based on emotion. Yes. We agree that. Yes. We work in a home mover market. We love that market. We're not particularly massively in the investment market. We just love the home mover market. Our mission as a business is to enable more people to move on to the next chapter of their life. And what people sometimes think is, I'm going to market and I want 500 grand for my house. And I ain't moving unless I get 500 grand for my house, because I love my house. And Tash and I joke with you, but because of our porcelain patio, we're going to want a bit more. And now my lighting in the garden, by the way. So I'm going to want probably 510 for mine. But, 610. But
I was going to say 510, no problem.
But why is that the wrong thing to do?
You're slightly, to be honest, just setting yourself up for failure with it.
Nice.
You have to always focus on not the figure that you're going to walk away from your property. You have to focus on the differential between what you're selling for and what you're buying for. So in really simple terms, if you were selling, I'm going to say 600 because it's easier, not 610. It's also more realistic. So if we work on 600 and that allowed you to buy for 700, your differential is 100,000.
Love it.
That's the thing to focus on, not the 600 price point you want to get.
So even a 570 offer is a good offer?
Yeah. If you can get something for 670, moving the next step.
Yeah.
So whatever offers you get, utilize them to see if you can make it work.
So we get this a lot, right? So we'll have a house on the market at 500. We'll get an offer at 480, and we would say to the client, look, I get it. It's lower than we expected, lower than our target price, all the comps stacked up, yada, yada, yada. But just go out this weekend. You're now so much more proceedable than we were yesterday. Agents will open doors to you. They'll show you around houses that you weren't, and just use it. And in fact, use it more. So you've got a 480 offer on your 500 grand house. Go and offer 560 on that one that's been on the market for 600 grand for ages and ages.
Yeah.
And that 480 offer could 20 grand loss could actually make you a 40 grand saving, which is a 20 grand profit. Better outcome.
Yep.
Yeah. Ultimate goal, ultimate outcome, whatever you want to talk about, which is why we never give people valuations on their house. A value isn't absolute, isn't definitive. Mr. Smith's opinion of that house, his value is X. Mr. Jones is Y, because they've got different opinions and they've got different situations. You've got to accept, refuse, and ideally use when you're moving house.
The other thing I think is important to note, which a lot of agents don't do when doing valuations, I won't give you a valuation on your property, but I will try and give you a baseline to do your sums off of.
Yeah.
Because I think it's also really important to understand at that point, can I move? Is it feasible? is this going to work for me?
Yeah.
A lot of agents go in with these high numbers to try and persuade you to come to the market. And effectively, you're making a life decision based on what they're telling you. You're making the decision as to, do I take the plunge and try and move, or do I stay put, or what do I do?
Because it's a ball ache, right? Being on the market, strangers through your house every weekend. It's not an exciting thing to do. No one enjoys it today.
It's not fun. It's not fun. And I've got a lot of clients who think it's going to be like easy peasy. And then 3 weeks down the line, they're like, I'm bored already. I'm like, well, we might have months of this. Yeah. Like, you've got to prepare yourself for the fact that it's not, you know, I talked about one earlier that we got agreed in the space of like 5 days. That's lovely. It doesn't always happen. You have to prepare yourself for like maybe 2-3 months of marketing. And if it's quicker than that, then happy days.
Average days on market at the minute has dropped down to 57. So that's less than 2 months.
Yeah.
It was longer. During the stamp duty things helped probably a little bit. That's now gone. But back in the last year, it was knocking up nearer to 70, I think. But good. But you're right. Average is a couple of months on the market.
Yeah.
So prepare yourself for that.
Prepare yourself for that. But also, like I say, when you're making that decision, try and get from an agent not the marketing price they want to go with. Try and get what they genuinely believe will be your worst case scenario figure. And do your sums off that.
And why they believe that.
Not
because they've picked it out of their rear end, but they can actually show you, let me show you as a backstop position, be nice to get 520, but it's 500 for your calculations because of this, this and this. This comparable, that comparable, not because they love your kitchen and they would love to buy it themselves, even though they're not buying it themselves. The only people that can actually tell you how much your house is worth is the people who want to actually buy it. And there's a little thing there. This isn't a rant, but I had a client recently and I appraised his house and it ended up being 6 months later, I was right. But at the start, it was like, my mate John said it's worth at least 650. And I said, is your mate John looking to buy a house? And he said, no. And I said, John hasn't got a clue what your house is worth because he's not your market. So let's guide it at 600 and we end up getting the kind of figure. We didn't get 650. John wasn't right because John couldn't afford to buy the house and he wasn't looking to buy a house. So it was really, don't be too steered by other people's opinion. Be steered, of course, you've got to get estate agents in, but many will overvalue you, tie you in for a long, long time, work your price down, end up selling much lower. But you do need to take feedback. If 4 houses around the corner from you reduced last week, you're probably going to need to reduce.
Yeah.
Because the market changes all the time.
And if all of your viewers come in and the feedback is something like, it's too much work for me, or it doesn't have a garage, or it's lacking this, or it's lacking that. A lot of the time we'll try and ask people to give us price-related feedback when they do give us feedback. It can be difficult for them to do that, so we don't always manage to. But if everyone says it's too much work, that means it's too much work for the money.
Yeah.
It doesn't just mean it's too much work for them. It means they're not prepared to pay that price and do the work.
Yeah, because a 500 grand house for 400 grand, the work wouldn't be...
They'll do the work suddenly.
Yeah. It's that balance between... And the important thing to remember as well, buyers will make their decision on what your house is worth based on what else they can buy for a certain amount of money. It's not in isolation, it's in competition of the market. I want to touch on the intricacies of what it takes when you're upsizing, when you've got chains, when you've got mortgage lenders, when you've got changing criterias, when you've got emotions and everything, right? So I'll frame it. Just today, the situation happened. It's been going on for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Great outcome. Similar, launched a market, loads of offers, this particular house, and it flew because the owner was totally guided by you on advice. The advice is always priced to entice, and it works when clients will give us full carte blanche, is that a word?
Yeah.
On this client, we've sold our houses for her for many years. She was like, just do what you think. It was offers in excess of strategy, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, offers in excess of 400.
And it was a frenzy, whereas most would have probably put it on, I think, 450.
Yeah, I think
many
easily
agents.
425. A lot would have said 450.
And then it's just a nightmare. But we've done the right thing, went the other way around, offers in excess of, a frenzy, loads of interest, couple of weeks, loads of offers, and we chose one. Good outcome, agreed it pretty quickly, and give a bit of an overview of what happened after that, because I think this is really common, but no one's actually discussing this kind of stuff to make Joe Blogs know, watching YouTube, that this can happen.
So it was eerily smooth sailing.
Yeah.
And I say eerily smooth sailing because if it is going that well, there's normally a hiccup that's going to come about somewhere. And we'd got through the majority of the legal work. They'd got their mortgage offer. They'd done most of the the sellers had done all the searches, inquiries, like everything had been dealt with. The whole chain had caught up. We were trying to push for completion.
Quite a big chain, right, as well, ish?
Four properties. So yeah, we're at the bottom, 3 above us.
I mean, yeah, three plus is probably headache territory.
Yeah.
So 4, 5 links is nightmare.
Yeah. So we were already starting to get to the point of being ready to exchange. The solicitor had told me pretty much all the points have been satisfied. There was just one point they were referring to the lender, but that happens a lot. That's very common. The lender normally just says, yeah, all fine. What referring to the lender means is there is a legal matter that the solicitor just needs to double check that the lender is happy to proceed with.
So rewind a little bit. So buyer got their mortgage offer pretty quickly. Mortgage survey was done.
Yes.
He had a decent loan to value. Mortgage offer was issued.
Yeah.
Solicitor then carries out their legal work.
Yep.
People forget, and it's really important, that the solicitor is there to act on behalf of the lender as well as the buyer of the property. So all through the searches and reading stuff that solicitors do, something was flagged up.
Yeah.
That they needed to refer it to lender.
Yes. And the lender then has to give the go-ahead as to whether, yes, they're happy to lend, or actually, no, this is a stumbling block.
But it was a formality at that point, wasn't it? It
formality,
was kind of,
complete formality.
There was
an issue. The solicitor was more than happy with the resolvement of it. The solicitor was happy to go. So just referred it to the lender saying, it's not really a problem, but just making sure you're happy. They weren't. Very unexpectedly, they weren't. And we suddenly got to a point where we were having really pushed the chain for completion dates, having to really backtrack to say, I'm really sorry. Actually, we've got really quite a big problem here, because if the lender says no, the simple matter is they're just not going to give you the money.
Yeah.
So the mortgage offer's null and void, and you start from scratch effectively.
And we had almost got 4 weeks back, right? This is almost like, as you said, it was going nice and smooth. Everyone was happy. All of a sudden, this has been dropped, and you're now waiting weeks for lenders to respond. Well,
in this case, we weren't even waiting weeks for lenders to respond. We thought it was dead from that lender. We thought that there was the proposal the lender had made for it to be something that they would work with was for a deed of easement to be done, which is basically some legal work which would take months to sort and could be very expensive to sort.
Yeah.
So the seller actually probably would have paid the money. That wasn't so much the issue. It was more the time for them that was the problem.
Yeah.
So we were then looking into other lenders. Would any other lenders then deal with it? But actually it transpired that that lender had always been fine with this situation up until 2 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
So lenders, it's really important to note, lenders change their criteria a lot.
Daily.
Yeah. It's all these things that they say, yes, we're happy with this, yes, we're happy with this, and then suddenly they're not happy with it anymore. And there's always ways around it, but those ways around it can take months and can be costly. So all of a sudden it does become quite a big problem. And we were then worried that actually if one lender had just changed their criteria on it, other lenders would also be doing so.
Which advice we were getting.
Which was the advice we were getting.
Probably going to be the case.
Yeah, that's what the solicitor was advising us. Now, it was only in a moment of actually, without going into too much detail on the property, the issue was an access problem.
Yeah.
Only to the front door. Now, if you don't have access for any reason to the property, obviously the lender's not going to be happy to lend on it, because the reality is it's then, frankly, not worth anything if you can't get to it.
And a deed of easement is pretty much changing the wording of the title at the property, right?
Yeah.
That's a big drawn-out process. You've got third parties involved, and it would take months and months, most likely.
Yes.
And costs a bit of money.
What ended up happening was I had a long conversation with several brokers to get their opinions on why this would be an issue for the lender. I then went back to the solicitor and I had a long conversation with her about the fact that there actually are other access points to the property. So even if that changed for any reason, you could still access and yada, yada, yada. And eventually the solicitor said, actually, yes, I agree. I'm happy with what you're saying. She was happy anyway with the situation we were trying to put forward, but she understood what I was saying and therefore ended up appealing to the lender again with a very, very detailed plan about the property and everything to do with it and everything I'd told her. And today, after a week, they finally said yes.
After referring it back out to the original surveyor who valued it for the bank 2 months ago,
Yeah.
2.5 months ago. So what I find quite amazing on this, and it's standard practice, right? This is really important to understand, is that the house has changed hands probably 6 times, maybe since it was built.
Actually, only 3 in this case, but
3.
it was still I want to say 1987 that this was all first put in place.
Yeah, so 38 years ago. I was born in 87.
There we go.
The house has been bought and sold 3 times in that time. It's always not been a problem. Statute declaration, and an indemnity policy.
That was exactly what we went down the route of.
Which is what 99% of lenders would be happy with generally. Yeah. And the solicitor was like, this would be fine, just do a stat dec and a indemnity and put it to the lender. Sorry, no, we've changed our criteria. We no longer accept stat decs and indemnities. We can't lend, sorry. At that point, this is where a great estate agent comes into their own, because I was trying to deal with it a bit while I was on holiday. And I probably wouldn't have challenged or had those deep discussions with the solicitor that you had to then get them to push back and then get the lender to push back to the surveyor, because ultimately lenders just want to get rid of their liability and say, well, if the surveyor says it's okay, we're okay with it, because if it all goes wrong, there's a claim on the surveyor. It's a really important point of, one, there can be loads of delays, and the longer a transaction takes, the more chance there is for situations like this to happen. Because you said 2 weeks prior, if we were like 2 weeks, if we put the house on the market 2 weeks earlier, got the buyer 2 weeks earlier, got the mortgage offer 2 weeks earlier, it would probably been fine.
Wouldn't have been an issue.
Because it was literally, and bear in mind, mortgage offers, the deal is there for you for 6 months, but the terms or the criteria isn't. That's changeable until you draw down the mortgage balance.
And actually, you say that, but even if you have a mortgage offer and nothing changes for you,
yeah.
If the situation for the lender changes, they can withdraw your mortgage offer.
Yeah.
A lender is very within their rights to say, no, actually, we're not giving that to you.
Until you've actually taken the money from them.
Yeah.
Yeah. As in, sorry, but we no longer lend above, common one, but we no longer lend on apartments above food outlets.
I've had it before actually as well, where they ended up saying halfway through a transaction, they said, we are lending on too many properties within this radius. So the lender's risk was suddenly higher than it had been when they first put out the offer.
I've had that for the block. We've got too many mortgages in that block.
Yeah.
As in like a big high street lender.
Yeah.
I've had another situation actually, just to touch on this. And the reason why we're saying this is you wouldn't get this detailed information from your estate agent. It's just really important to understand that the average time to exchange contracts at the minute is, I think, about 4 months.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time for things to change outside of your control. There's so many moving parts in property transactions. I had one where it was a block of flats above a row of shops. The lender that the current owner borrows through no longer lends on the building. So in the time that the guy's owned it, let's take an example. Maybe they got a mortgage through NatWest. He's been there 10 years. NatWest will no longer lend on a property like that. So when we first put it together, it's like, oh, great, NatWest, the buyer's getting with NatWest as well. Happy days. But they changed their criteria, and sorry, you've got to find another lender. And you just got to be aware that until push it through as quickly as you can. Yeah. I think is the general advice.
It's why it's so, to kind of summarise, it's why it's so important. 2 things. 1, to have a really good solicitor.
Yes.
And actually, on that topic, I would really encourage people, this might be controversial and a lot of brokers are not going to like me for this, but I really need people to stop using the solicitors that their mortgage brokers are recommending. Because the mortgage brokers' recommendations, more often than not, harsh as it is to say, are big companies that just pay really good referral fees. And that mortgage broker, more often than not, is not doing any of the sales progression at any point. So it's fantastic that they've got a relationship with Joe Bloggs at Fast Conveyancing. But actually, if Fast Conveyancing aren't doing their job and I need to be chasing them up, their mortgage broker's relationship with that person means nothing at that point.
Yeah.
And they are often what I call factory conveyancers who will just do things at their own pace, in their own time, when they want to do it. You are not a priority whether you need to be or not. And it's just a factory motion going through, and it ends up being a disaster.
I just think there's 2 areas in your life that you should never scrimp on cost. One is your estate agent.
Obviously,
because you get what you pay for. But also, same applies to your solicitor.
Absolutely.
Solicitor, legal advisor. I had a situation recently, it's about a year ago now, and they had used a factory conveyancing firm, which you know, you should never do, but they did. And their conveyancer had missed it when they bought it. So they now needed to get indemnity. They were like, this wasn't flagged by my solicitor, and it's because people don't think that solicitors can drop balls as well, because they're solicitors and they've been to university and they're highly qualified. You have to pay the right money because that's your legal advice. That's like, you can be really exposed if they get it wrong.
Well, I've got a seller as of last year, she's not anymore because she couldn't sell. Her solicitor, when she bought, missed the fact that the warranty provider for her flat had gone bust 2 years earlier. So the property that she was buying with a 10-year warranty no longer had a warranty.
Yeah.
And it made it unmortgageable for then the next people. But her solicitor missed it.
Yeah.
So she, when she came to selling it, lost her buyer, lost a lot of money on her onward purchase that all fell through. Aside from the fact that she lost nearly a year of her life trying to get this all sorted because we kept pushing to try and resolve it, there was no resolve in the end.
Well, the irony is on that situation as well is that during the 10-year, you have to have a warranty, otherwise it's not mortgageable.
Yeah.
When it's 11 years old,
Doesn't matter.
it's mortgageable. It's
This was 8 years old.
Crazy.
In fact, I think it was 8.5 years old. It was 18 months difference that it would have made. So she'll come back to us in a year.
Yeah, she has to kind of down tools on it.
But she's just, she's in the process of suing her old solicitor for all her costs associated with it, for basically selling her an unmortgageable flat with a mortgage.
Yeah, crazy. So I'm conscious that we've gone quite detailed and deep, but I really hope that people, my kind of goal with these episodes is that people will stick it on the TV. They will sit and watch it because it's all really important stuff. We could be sitting here talking about the exciting stuff of moving house and the people and the things that people really love, but things like lenders' situations can change. We had 4 links in that chain, all on Steph.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Because everyone's emotions then were riding on if Steph could pull this out of the bag or not. And it's not. And to get the lender to backtrack on a decision is almost unknown, I think.
Yeah,
You've probably only got a 20% success rate, I reckon, sometimes.
I was very shocked that it came through, to be honest. I didn't tell the client that. To the client, it was all, no, don't worry, it's not a problem. But actually, inside, I was thinking, I really think this is a very, very slim chance of it working.
Yeah, they're going to do a U-turn on the fact that they're not going to lend on it. Once they've said no, it's generally a no.
Yeah.
And I think my 22 years, and I forgot how many days that is of experience, tells me that's probably a 20% chance you're ever going to be successful there. So you really pulled it out of the bag. And I think people need to understand that these, and obviously the client every day, understandably, her life was on hold and blah, blah, blah. But it takes a week, 10 days for anyone to do anything lender-wise.
Yeah.
And that's why people don't appreciate at times that as much as we're there all the time, 7 days a week, pushing stuff, but we're only as fast as us agents as the next person, which is a solicitor or a mortgage lender or a surveyor.
But it's why it's so important to have someone fighting your corner as well, because you don't do this every day. We do. I knew the things that could potentially be pushed back on. The client didn't.
Yeah.
Client was in meltdown whilst I was in a kind of, well, let's just see what we can do here. If you have an agent who's inexperienced or who isn't really there, i.e. online agent, you don't get any of that support. And you might get a cheaper fee.
Yeah.
But if she'd have had a cheaper fee but not sold the property, the fee by that point is irrelevant. I'm sure you'd rather pay a bit more but have actually banked the money that you needed to bank.
I say that. Pay an agent extremely well, but only once they've achieved for you what you are setting out to achieve. Simple as that. Pay them whatever, because you won't say yes until it works financially for you. And it's like every day, any news, and by 7 days it was like, it's clearly bad news. This client particularly. Yeah. And you were trying to comment to people, like, look, this is just the process. Unfortunately, it isn't going to, no news in this situation is good news, not bad news.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's the whole thing of, as with anything in life, kind of talking about estate agency, talking about solicitors, just talking about all these people who like know things are going to be able to help you and things like that. Cheap is not often cheerful. No. Like the way that people, it is that kind of line, you get what you pay for. You do get what you pay for. And when it comes to these sort of things, and effectively it is your life in someone's hands at that stage.
And it comes down to a person's ability or the amount of time they have or don't have to focus on helping you, right? So I'll talk about there's 4 crucials when moving house, and I'll finish on this point because we've been going on for 48 minutes. Price, presentation, promotion, and person are the 4 most crucial things when it comes to selling your house. Get the price wrong, it's not going to go well. Get the promotion wrong, it's not going to go well. Get the presentation wrong, it's not going to go well. But more importantly, get the wrong person, and it's going to be a complete train wreck. So spend time interviewing lots of agents. I'll put a link probably in this video in the description to we've got a free download called 16 Crucial Questions to Ask Estate Agents. Really good download. Use it to interview agents, make a really deep informed decision, and drop comments on the video if we can help at all. Steph, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Great work. We'll do this again soon. And I like the fact this was focused. There's a lot of stuff in here that's relevant for people just moving house.
Yeah.
But we target it to upsizers. The situation we spoke about the deed of variation and deed of easement, was a lady upsizing in the market with a 4-link chain. So great work, and we'll see you on the next one.